Good morning, everybody. The time is now 9 o'clock. I will call this meeting to order. Please rise. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We have a quorum present. All members are here and present. And the next item on the agenda is the approval of the regular minutes from the last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to that? Hearing none, they will stand as posted. Governing Board Vice President Sue Fitzsimons, it is your microphone.
Thank you. I would like to recognize Dee Comont. When the past member services receptionist indicated he was retiring, Dee came on as a temporary replacement without training or any other preparation into this very multidimensional and demanding role. She has far exceeded expectations and certainly deserves recognition for her efforts. As a professional, as knowledgeable about the community, as a super competent information handler and disseminator, as the traffic controller because she is the one who guides and directs owner members and the general public who visit member services, and as a warm-hearted, caring person with a quiet yet totally efficient work style. And all of this in addition to her role as box office coordinator. Congratulations, Dee. And I'd like you to accept this certificate that says, "It is awarded to Dee Comont in recognition of and deep appreciation for her extraordinary multitasking skills and exceptional competency as box office coordinator and member services receptionist from the Recreation Centers of Sun City West." Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Next items up there are administrative duties. The new governing board election day for in-person voting will be March 29th, 2021 at the Data Resource Center at R.H. Johnson Library. That's just an announcement for everybody. 4.02, correction for approval, FI 12. Investment Association funds, section 3.1.2.3, insertion per the 2005 governing board minutes. This was a clerical error that was found. Then in 2015, the governing board put this wording in directly. It was never put into our policies. And administratively, this is just a correction to make sure the housekeeping of what we have in our policies is correct. Do I hear unanimous consent to have this done? So moved. Thank you very much. EOM reports. Consent agenda. Who's my consent agenda? My consent agenda. Well, any objections to this? Hearing none. Thank you. Number 6, Budget and Finance Committee October EOM report. Ann Brown.
Thank you, President George. BNF met twice during the month of October. We met on the 6th, and at that meeting, we reviewed our committee goals. We added another goal to look at a 10-year capital reserve review. Financial policy FI01 is currently under review and will be presented with some suggested changes at our next meeting. We had several policies we reviewed, made no revisions. We have a red line version of FI11, which will go to the governing board workshop on November 6th. We have discussed changes to FI15. Those are also pending further information. John Hobold and Lisa Vines of the committee are meeting with Deb Long to review changes on FI 17. We reviewed a redlined M01, section 4.2.3, and recommend that to the governing board. We discussed a red line in policy FI 12, which we just discussed, to write into the policy. We heard from our CFO, Pete Finelli, about encumbrance procedures and also an update on the health insurance. At our meeting on the 20th, we looked at the review of the September and the FY year-to-date financials. We had a presentation from General Manager Bill Schwind on an analysis of preservation of principle. We had a Q&A teleconference with Andrew Maslick, who is our Vanguard representative, then held a discussion on policies FI 04 and FI 12, and have a change proposed for FI 12, which we will discuss later in this meeting. Also formed a subcommittee of Lou Mancuso and John Hobold, committee members, to meet with Pete Finelli, our CFO, to review our risk-reward options and look at investment scenarios for the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Do I hear unanimous consent to accept that report? Hearing no objections, so ordered. 6.02, Ann, you're back up again.
Yes, the September 2020 financials have been reviewed and accepted by the Budget and Finance Committee, and they have been filed.
That is just filing for us. Thank you very much. 6.03, first quarter financial report, General Manager, Bill Schwind.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I am going to defer to Mr. Finelli regarding the update on our financials for this quarter.
Thank you. This is a requirement of our policies for the, as he said, the GM to report to the governing board the quarterly results. It was mentioned there was difficulty to see and follow along with some of the small print of the income statement on the screen in previous meetings, so I will highlight the larger variables of the income statement on this PowerPoint PDF up on the screen. Reminder, once approved, the financials are posted on suncitywest.com website. It was noted in the VNF Finance Committee, the variances are explained in the financials right after the income statement, so if you'd like to look for more explanations beyond what I state here today. First of all, the operating revenues for the quarter were up 36 grand over, sorry, thank you. Operating revenues were up over 36 grand. Golf was the largest benefactor of that with the higher number of rounds we're seeing, as well as carts and range balls. Two items that are expected to be down due to lane restrictions and event cancellations are sports pavilion and special events down 25,000. And of course, the pro shop restrictions are impacting merchandising and food and beverage out on the golf courses. We did have a $28,000 write-down of expenditures that were done for work on the Echo Mesa maintenance office from the prior year. And the all other is down mostly due to tours and hall rentals being down with the restrictions. On operating expenses, overall, we are favorable to the budget by $504,000.
Sorry, wrong format, it's not opening correctly.
Thank you. I'm on the second page now.
Yeah, I don't think it's not going to stay up. If you want to keep going.
Sure. Okay, so operating expenses favorable by $504,000. The vast majority of that's coming from wages and benefits of about $259,000. That's due mostly to open positions in golf maintenance and landscaping, and also facility closures at Kuntz and Beardsley. Utilities are down 82 grand, mostly due again to facility closures, but also some of the expenditures we made in prior years for energy saving initiatives seem to be paying off very well. Repair and maintenance is also down 110,000. It's a very highly variable category of expense, so no real item to define there. Landscape maintenance is the only item that's up. It's 133,000 above on the year-to-date. And this mostly is because the seed was budgeted to be in line with the course closures for September and October, but all the seed was received in. And so by accounting principles, we have to accept the invoicing in the month that it was received. Most of that negative variance should be recovered in October. Equipment is down 90,000. This is mostly due to timing, and some of the facility closures have delayed some of those expenditures. All other is down 96 grand. That's across a whole spectrum of items. The biggest item is supplies, with the closures is benefiting. Legal and professional employee relations, taxes and things like that make up the gist of those. Moving down into capital related, we're up right now 950,000 year-to-date. The vast majority of that's in unrealized gains, 804,000 favorable year-to-date. APFs are running 46 grand above budget. We attribute some of that to the impact of the REDS program, and low interest rates certainly seem to be spurring home sales. Gain on sale of assets were up 51,000. Was due to some trade-in of vehicles that had no net book value, and also the budget called for some write-downs, which haven't occurred yet. Depreciation is favorable by 49,000, mostly due to delays, and all other had actually no variance. So total on our operating, we're up 541,000. Capital related up 950,000, so about 1.5 million ahead year-to-date through the first quarter. I won't get into as much detail on the prior year, but overall operating revenue is up 117,000. Operating expenses are down 43,000. Capital related is up 676,000, with the biggest chunk of that being unrealized gains. And so overall operating is up 159,000 versus prior year. Capital related is up 676,000, so the total is 835,000 ahead of prior year. So.
Thank you, Pete. Directors, I'm just going to go around if you have any questions about this high-level idea. Director Connor? Sharon? Rebecca? Nothing? Nothing? No? Bob? Jim? Pete, thank you very much. Next item up, Bill, you're up for a COVID update for us.
Thank you, sir. As we sit here today, the numbers are looking not so great, as you probably have seen the news, when it comes to about 41 states on the increase, unfortunately, as far as these reported cases go and those types of things. Obviously, we hit our peak back in July. Things have tapered off with the closing of bars, restaurants, gymnasiums, and the like. And then as things progressed, got a little better, things opened up again, and obviously the numbers are jumping up. And that came after Labor Day and schools starting again and those types of things. So unfortunately, that's where we're at. As far as the Arizona reproduction rate, as far as the R1 scenario goes, the health officials would like to see that below the 1 dot, and we are at, I think, 1.5, 1.1, something along those lines. So that is an area that is causes this virus to continue to grow at a somewhat of a rapid rate, and so we keep an eye on that. When it comes to the indoor gyms and the fitness clubs, basically, again, we signed off on the attestation that we understand the rules and regulations related to what it takes to reopen these facilities and how we're going about doing so. We are abiding by those, and I think we're holding off as best we can. Our numbers are down to about a third of what they normally are via the swimming pools and the use of the gymnasiums and fitness areas and stuff. So I think people are taking a lot of preventative care amongst themselves and showing up in least crowded times and using the facilities, and they're following the spatial things. So when we limit indoor and outdoor gatherings, that's still a critical link for us. We're working with a lot of clubs and activity groups, be it golf, pickleball, tennis, and other large groups that want to do fitness-type activities, whether it's yoga, dance, and that. So I think the club presidents have been working well with our staff to kind of make sure that the spacing takes place. And we are doing as best we can, masking up, particularly in the enclosed areas, and I think it's making a difference locally. So that's a good thing. That's our goal. When it comes to how we get out of this and how we move forward, this webpage can be found by anyone in simply the Arizona Department of Health Services. Go to their dashboard, and if you would just click on the map to the left that highlights Maricopa County, when it comes to the 9 boxes that you see on the top half of that spreadsheet, that bottom right-hand corner talks about the total positivity numbers. And if that is below 10%, that really mandates what we're doing. And the state doesn't want to see, if we're over that level, the state does not want to see groups larger than 10 congregate. And so we're still at a very high level. Moving on, Katie, if you can, I don't know if you can really see this from the distance that we are, but the red box to the right basically says we are at a substantial risk if that percentage of positive tests is over 10%. A while back, we were at 33%, be it Maricopa County, and that's about July-ish and whatnot. We have gotten down below 10. We have opened up our facilities to a 50% level, and that was early September, late August. And then as we've gotten up into today's date, those numbers have now risen over the 10% mark, which we are not closing again, but we are just making sure that we are following as much of as we are following the rules that we have attested for when it comes to the spacing and masking and the number of people that we're allowing in the facility. No guests is still the policy here. If we are not going to allow members at 25 or 50%, we do not want guests taking the positions of potential owner members who want to utilize the facilities. Very consistent with our neighboring groups as far as Sun City Grand and Sun City, and so we're all abiding by the same attestations and principles that in the guidelines that have been set up by the state. So I think, is that it, Katie? All right, and we keep monitoring those numbers on a daily basis, and we hope, from what we're hearing nationally, that there's a surge from the Midwest and that type of thing. We just hope that everything that we're doing here does its job, and we keep the numbers in Sun City West at a very, very low rate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill about the COVID numbers or anything like, Director Connor?
Thank you, George. Very helpful, Bill, thank you. I had a little trouble following some of the statistics and charts. If you go to the second to bottom slide that you had, please. All I'm asking for is some help in understanding where we are, because when I read the chart above it, I wasn't tracking the two. Can you tell me where we are on terms of cases, percent positivity, and COVID-like illness on this chart? I understand some may be minimum, some may be moderate, some may be substantial, but I couldn't figure out where we are on each one of those.
They are all, excuse me, Jerry, they are all basically the same scenario here. The green, yellow, and red columns basically depict on the very bottom, if our positive testing numbers are below 5%, we are considered minimal risk. That's where we want to be. The middle column, be it yellow, is if our percentage points are between 5 and 10, and that gets you basically as far as from an operational perspective, the state basically says you can get open again to about a 50% level. And then in the substantial number, if we're over 10%, that is considered high risk, and they would really want to mandate that any kind of large groups gathering and whatnot are controlled to the number of 10, and really kind of make sure that all of the social distancing and the masking and everything else going on is mandated.
And where are we today? Are we minimum, moderate, or substantial with respect to percent positivity?
This report was put together a couple of days ago, and if you go to the webpage, basically the Arizona Department of Health Services, ADHS, and go to their dashboard, scroll down. If you click on the Maricopa County outline, which is the red shaded area on the state of Arizona there, the bottom right-hand column of those 9 boxes tells you your daily number when it comes to the state as far as what our total percentage positive rating is. And as far as that goes, as of a couple of days ago, it was 10 point something. I looked this morning, I believe, and we were 10.9. So that is really the dictating number that everyone's going off of.
And I saw that it wasn't 100% clear to me, but thank you. On terms of cases, can you tell me which of these three categories we fall in today or 2 days ago, or whenever you did it?
Substantial.
Or insubstantial, because I couldn't translate greater than 100 per 100,000
Yeah,
against the chart above it.
The very bottom line there, COVID-like illnesses, greater than 10%, the percent positivity greater than 10% in that substantial column.
Yeah. Okay.
That defines where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Director Haddock? Director Davidson? Ann? Sue? Ed?
Yeah, Bill, I have a little question similar. I didn't get the answer that I wanted, at least out of it, but are we, at our clubs or rooms, for a while, we were at like 25, and then we were at 50. I don't know what that number means, except, I guess, individual places. But my question is, where are we at that now with that number?
We are keeping things at trying to sustain groups less than 10. So we do the square footage in our clubs, and Riley has been working with, I think, Donna and the club presidents as far as organizing the indoor activities to a 25 or 50% level. We should be at 25% of our occupancy based on the substantial number that is being quantified here. So based on our occupancy load, if the room holds 50 people, at a 50% level, we're going to let 25 people in. And at a 25% level, we'd go half of that.
Okay.
And so that's being monitored by the club presidents. When it comes to outdoor activities such as golf, that, I think Pat and the team regulate the times on tee sheets as far as when we let people out. At a 50% level, we're back to like the 7 or 8 minute mark. And when it gets to the substantial level, we back that tee sheet off to 10 minutes to basically give a lot of gap and not having a lot of people hanging around the clubhouse unnecessarily and that type of thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Bill on this? Bill, thank you so much. Moving into new business. Katie, you're first up with our torch presentation.
So I think most of you have heard already that we do have some torch videos we are doing in lieu of the academies, since we had to cancel the academies due to COVID. So these are meant to be sort of weekly educational videos. We may get to a point kind of like the academies where we stop for a bit, take a hiatus, and do some more videos. But right now we've got about 4 in the bank, and we're going to try to drop them every Monday on YouTube. But they'll also be promoted on all our other social media. So if you see those links, click on them. The one I'm going to show you today is a special preview. It won't come out till Monday, but we wanted you to see kind of what we're doing. The gist of this one is during COVID closure, a lot of people were asking for dues refunds, and it became abundantly clear they didn't understand what dues actually went to pay for. So that's the reason behind this video.
Hi, my name is Jack Fisher. I'm with the Sun City West Torch Committee. Ordinarily, Torch meets twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, where we allow new residents, and some not so new residents, the ability to find out the things that we can see and do here at Sun City West. We visit the rec centers, we look at the golf courses, we explore the various clubs and the opportunities that we have here at Sun City West. Unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, we have been unable to meet lately. Because of this, we've decided to do some informational videos on some items that we would ordinarily have covered during our sessions. Today, we're going to talk about what our annual dues support. Here to do that is Terry Wood from the Recreation Centers of Sun City West Administrative Group. Thank you.
Welcome to Member Services. My name is Terry. I'd like to explain a little bit about the questions that we receive here in the membership office. We'd like to explain a little bit about where your dues go. During COVID, of course, we were shut down, and that's a question that we received on a daily basis. The dues go for daily operations, whether you use the facilities or not, whether they're open or not. They cover a multitude of things: insurance, the common areas that need to be maintained, the parking lots that you park in, the medians, tree maintenance, when people do property transfers, the governing board operations, CC&R enforcement, human resources, the finance department. And those are things that people don't normally think about our dues covering. Golf courses, they beautify the community, they keep us cool. If you walk by them, you'll notice a big drop in the temperature. The dues also will support your special events, the arts and crafts fairs, dances, the entertainment that we have here, the club events that we have. Whether you use those or not, whether you ever step foot in a recreation facility or not, the money goes to support so many different things. If you have a question regarding what your dues support, we're more than happy to have you come in and answer your questions for you. When you do come in as a new homeowner, we give you this packet. We provide you with a lot of different information and kind of overwhelm you. So we ask you that you take this home, review it. If you have any questions, you can always call us. We're available 5 days a week. Included in that is, what do my dues pay for? I've gone over it a little bit for this video, but you can pick this up at any of the facilities, or you can come in here and get a copy of it. And you have any questions, feel free to ask us. That's what we're here for. Thank you.
Katie, thank you so much. That is awesome. That's absolutely incredible. It's, like I always say, my little joke is we're moving to the 80s, and I love it.
I just want to thank Johnson and Martin. They're the ones that are creating these videos, and they've done an excellent job.
Absolutely. Thank you. Directors, any comments about this? Sharon?
Do we have these available in the library for people that?
They
don't
haven't been
understand?
published yet.
I mean, when they are,
I
will
would,
they be available in
they'll
the
be on
library?
YouTube.
I know, but if I don't have a computer, will they be where they can get them?
Oh, it should be at the
Okay.
Data Resource Center. Yeah.
Thanks.
On any of the computers in the Data Resource Center, they can pull it up.
Okay, thanks.
Roberta? Jerry? Yeah? No? Sue?
Yes, Katie.
Vice President. I love it.
Katie, is there any consideration to maybe making some changes to the Torch program based on the fact that you now have these great videos that might shorten the physical time that people have to commit in order to be a part of the program?
Yeah, the Torch program changes constantly based on feedback from the students. And we ask that question every year: is it too many sessions, not enough sessions? And they're pretty divided. A lot of people love it. They think there should be too many or more sessions because there's so much material. Other people think it's a tough commitment. So there hasn't been an overwhelming desire by the students necessarily to cut the time frame. And the bonding that they do and the getting to know the speakers and the behind the scenes and the managers that can only be done in that kind of a format remains, but we might be able to supplement it with videos like this for people that can't put up 7 weeks.
Yeah, thank you.
Donna? Bob? Jim?
No, I just wanted to say it was a great job, or very, very well done. Thank you, Katie.
Bill? I know you got something to say about this.
Well, no, Terry did a great job, as did Martin and all, as far as Johnson putting that all together, and hats off to Katie for sure. I just want to give a compliment to Mr. O'Hara. You haven't seen it yet, but the video on the golf lab pad is close to an Emmy Award.
Does it have Pat in it? Well, then we'll lose the Emmy. No, I'm only kidding. Thank you very much. Moving on to new business. Ann Brown, you're up.
Thank you. Item 7.02, concerning the annual Clifton Larson Allen Auditor retention. Per the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, I move that the governing board approve the retention of Clifton Larson Allen as the association auditor.
Second.
Okay, second is first. Any discussion about this? Hearing none, I'll go for unanimous consent. Do I hear any objection? Hearing none, thank you. Approved. Ann, you're next.
Thank you. This concerns the Clifton Larson Allen audit report approval. Per the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, I move that the governing board approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 Clifton Larson Allen audit report as submitted.
Second by Bob. Any discussion about this? I'll go for unanimous consent on this. Is there any objection? So ordered. Thank you. I guess, Ann, you're busy today.
I am busy. Item 7.04 concerns the annual transfer of cash flow funds to and from the operating account. Per the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, I move that the governing board approve the annual funds transfer from the reserve fund to the operating account as of June 30th, 2020.
I need a second.
Second?
Second by Sharon. Any discussion about this?
I'm sorry, George, did I miss the amount, Ann? When I was listening, I just,
The amount was not in there.
I think it was 46,000 and change, but it would be nice just to have it.
I'll get that.
I'm going to have to look and find this. Pete, do you know off the?
657,000 in the 2020 column.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion about this? Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll go for unanimous consent. Any objections? Hearing none, so ordered. 7.05, Director Davison.
So regarding policy C03, the Properties Committee section, it was just a cleanup of language in section 1.5.1 to reflect new titles for the staff. And on 1.54, it was just cleanup of language. So I move for approval.
I think you have the motion in front of you.
Yes?
Yeah, you have to read the motion
Oh.
as stated. I don't mean to tell you what to do.
Per the recommendation of the Properties Committee, I move that the governing board approve the strikeout of the word association and policy FA01. Oh, wrong one.
This one right here.
Oh, how come I don't get
We'll
these?
get there, don't worry about it.
Yeah. All right. On 705, we are, per the recommendation of the Properties Committee, I move that the governing board approve the in-gross revisions to policy C03, section 1.5 as redlined.
Very good. Do I hear a second? Sue?
I can second it.
Madam Vice President? Any discussion on this? Hearing none, I will go for unanimous consent on this. Is there any objection to this? So ordered. Roberta, you're up again.
All right. Per the recommendation of the Properties Committee, I move that the governing board approve the strikeout of the word association in policy FA01, section 3, 3.2 as redlined.
Need a second, please?
Second?
Second by Sharon. Any discussion about this? Hearing none, I will go for unanimous consent on this. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. I think we're back to, BNF chairperson. This is back to you, Ann.
Thank you. As we have mentioned before, section, or policy M01, section 4, subsection 4.23, merely cleans up the fact that tenant card, owner member cards do not have to be physically returned. They can be turned off automatically through the member services. Per the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, I move that the governing board approve the revised wording of policy M01, section 4, subsection 4.23, regarding the suspension of owner member cards if tenant cards are active on a property as redlined.
Do I hear a second to this?
I'll second.
There's a second by Sue. Any discussion about this point? Once again, I'll go for unanimous consent about this. If there is any objection, please state it. Hearing none, so ordered by unanimous consent. Unanimous consent.
George, if I may, please.
Yes, Brother Jerry.
A more generic comment. While we continue to call it redlining because that's the term everybody uses, in fact, I want to express my appreciation to Karen and all the various committees for using blue so I can see it. For those of us who can't distinguish red, it's been a real challenge last year, and I know it was quite an effort to move over, so thank you one and all.
Jerry, we do our best to be as accommodating as possible. You know how that is. That's it. 7.08. Bill, you're back up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, I would just like to go over a brief slide presentation talking about the preservation of principal in our reserve fund and how that affects repair, replacement, and new capital as we move forward into our budget planning season. This is meant as an educational tool to help the governing board as we move forward into this year's budget and how we move forward into the future as well. Last year, when we were assembling the 2021 budget, we ran into a little bit of an issue with the wonders of the COVID environment and how it affected our reserve study, which then presented itself as we figured out we had our principal exposed and we were dealing with the potential risk of deferring projects. So moving forward, the objectives and the goals of the investment of the association funds is pretty specific. The primary objective of the investment program is a conservative and prudent approach, and basically the specific goals target the preservation of capital as your number one criteria, followed by liquidity and the rate of return. And it specifically states that in the policy in that order. So preservation of capital, again, is the foremost objective when it comes to our investment portfolio. In our funding policy on our reserve funds, basically, the association has set aside an acceptable amount of a ratio between 40 and 100% of our fully funded balance. So essentially, what our balance is, what our preserve is, when it comes to looking out the long term as far as what projects we have on the plate and where we're going into the future, we would like to be above 40%, closer to 100% when it comes to having that fully funded. And that's a floor mandated by the governing board as we move forward. So with the internal controls that we have invested, Pete and the governing board's finance director basically review, along with an independent auditor, a system to protect the investment of our portfolio from fraud and poor management. This contractor at this particular point in time is Association Reserves, and they do the planning for the inevitable for us. So the reserve fund right now is basically some risk management that we're doing. We're analyzing the situation, we're monitoring it, and we've identified some issues that are in conflict, I think, with our presiding policies. So if I may, just to quickly reiterate, policy FI 12 talks about portfolio protection as being our number one priority. In consulting with DJ Vlaming, our Associates Reserve professional, his association manages the HOA industry and municipal standards on risk for over 25,000 HOAs and communities similar to how we operate here as a planned community. What we're being told by that consultant that it is rare to have any of these organizations invested in equities. Hence, your principal is exposed. So it's understood that some states don't allow this. And then there's a fiduciary responsibility of the governing board that deals with exposure and how we deal with our R&R funding. I would like to, at this point, just share with you a little bit when it comes to liability and similar associations. I do want to share just a comment. Looking at this issue, on October 15th, I sent an email over to our attorney, basically to clear up some conflicting statements that we were dealing with when it comes to our investment policy and the reserve fund. The policy mandates that protection of principal is the governing board's #1 priority, followed by liquidity and rate of return. Right? So I asked him a couple of specific questions. One thing that came up after talking with DJ was he was somewhat startled that our association had an investment in the equities program. Pretty rare in his world. So one of the questions that came up that I asked James the other day were basically, are money markets, mutual funds, and equities investments by HOAs or planned communities legal in Arizona? Some states they are not. I wanted clarification on that. Would a governing board be potentially liable for loss of principal if repair and maintenance continue to get deferred, or the loss of principal? And do other states have investment restrictions on similar organizations? So when Mr. Hazelwood responded to that, I was somewhat taken back by his response, because he basically says, Bill, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but he sent me copies of emails that were dated 2012, 2013 to my predecessor, Mr. Whiting, here, basically addressing the same issue. And he basically says that the general legal view is that investments of association monies should be conservative, perhaps similar to trustees of a trust, but also under the umbrella of the duties of directors of the Nonprofit Act. Now, I would encourage you all to, if you have time, to go to a webpage and look at the Nonprofits Act, because it does talk about board responsibilities and how funds are invested, just for your edification. But going back to his responses back in 2012, he basically states that he understood that the Finance Committee is considering the issue of a low-rate return on large amounts of investment money that the rec centers has available. It's considering recommending investments like mutual bonds outside the scope of Section 5.5 in the bylaws. The Treasury's duties require investing in FDIC-insured investments, instruments backed by a full faith and credit of the U.S. government. A bylaw amendment would obviously be required. And so he reiterates that the language of the bylaws about investing in institutions or instruments backed by full faith and credit of the U.S. government, and therefore, he says, a change in policy would be needed. Okay? So the duties of directors in many respects to act like trustees of a trust when it comes to money, making capital preservation paramount. He says, most of us who consider this issue think an ordinary prudent person would not want to have anything to risk the principal. We are not aware of community associations that deviate from U.S. government-insured investments. It would probably be unnecessarily risky for a director to vote on a plan that risked principal beyond the risk of a U.S. government default on an obligation. That was some legal advice in 2012, followed up by the legal issue of liability, and he says that is a harder question, is whether the financial investment policy can be changed in a way to allow greater returns or get investment advice. He says that's a difficult question we have dealt with on occasion, but because directors are often regarded as fiduciaries, similar to trustees, safety of capital is usually the paramount concern. A director can rely on information and opinions of experts like financial advisors that may provide a little bit of a safe harbor. Whether it's an absolute shield against liability, I am not prepared to say. And so just believe that you can delegate the investing function to an advisor, but a board is never absolved from its fiduciary obligation to the association to act reasonably and in a prudent manner. And so that was the response that I got to my recent request to our attorney relative to where we stand in this particular policy. So industry standard of investments will tell you that it's very rare for organizations like ours to be invested in equities. looking at similar situations, i.e. Sun City West, some of our comparable neighbors, they do not get into that market. Moving on, Katie, thank you. Inevitably, expenses happen. We know that. So we have a great plan that was helped put together by our finance team, our staff, as well as association reserves that the board is ultimately responsible for. Delays usually get expensive, and typically homeowners get stuck with paying the bills, and those, we're told, are the 4 reserve rules. So, in 2015, the governing board approved a change in the investment strategy. Cash and CDs to bonds managed by a portfolio of 60% bonds and 40% equities by Vanguard. Over that time, the funds have done well. There is no doubt about that. A $3.5 million increase to the association with the investment into these equities and bonds. And that is compounded by the fact that we've also raised fees in our APF environment, going from $3,100 to $3,500 over the 5-year period, as well as some cash and CDs and other investments that we have. That's terrific. We were sitting in a very, very good spot, and I think personally right now we still are. However, last March, when COVID arrived, we took a close to $4.5 million, $4.2 million decline in our reserves in 30 days. So the $3.5 million that we've earned over a 5-year period was wiped away in 30 days. So 3.6 in equities and a little $600,000 in bonds. Our fully funded balance declined at that point in time close to our 40% floor when it comes to the policy that we have in place as to where we are with our fully funded balance. So unfortunately, the timing on that was horrible. We were facing some projects. Obviously, we came to the table initially with a $13 million proposed request for capital items. The chances of that getting funded, probably not, but the dip in our reserves certainly mandated that projects get removed from this list without really even questioning things. One of which was a close to $5 million item relative to golf course irrigation. Now, if you understand the reserve study, you know in the next 5 to 7 years, there are some very aged irrigation systems within our golf course operation that are needing to be repaired. Those are expensive. We know that. And so deferring those this year like we did and getting it off the map pushed it out, which causes it to potentially get more expensive down the line. And I think we have an obligation to the owners here and the golfers and everyone that lives within the walls here to maintain the facilities that we have and not be potentially having our decisions made and managed by Wall Street rather than the folks that live inside these walls. And so, again, a $5.9 million budget was approved last year in the wake of a very large dip in our reserve funds, and of that, we're still sitting on $1.8 million of projects that have been deferred until January of this year so we can do further assessment on where we are with the economy. One of those projects is a big hitter, and I think Carl's waiting on that one, but it's the parking lot over at Palm Ridge. That parking lot needs to be fixed. It's got weeds growing through it, and every day you go by there and it kind of looks like an alligator. And so we take a lot of pride in the facilities and how things look around here, and I know you all do too, and it's just something that we want to make sure that we're able to take care of. So as we move forward, I want to knock on wood because in the last 8 months, after that $4.5 million loss, we've crawled back to where we were back in January, which is very comforting to Pete, myself, and I think everybody in this room, as well as the owner members. That's terrific. But that's fostered by what, $3.5 trillion of input from the federal government. That's a rare step, right? And so that's out there. We have an election coming up. We all know about that. The cash infusion I talked about from the federal government. We've got housing and inflation issues out there. Unemployment's still not rectified. It's pretty spooky. And if a looming correction is out there after a 10-year bull market, that jeopardizes where our reserve fund really sits. Because the big picture in our reserve fund is our principal balance. And if that gets adjusted by a correction, where are we percentage-wise when it comes to the floor implemented by the policy we talked about earlier between 40 and 100%? A simple 20% correction, and I think that slide's coming up. Well, we'll go there. But a correction to that can get us very close to the floor when we're trying to figure out next year's budget. And so we've had conversations with the advisory board, with BNF. We've had conversations within our finance department directly with Andy, who is our representative at Vanguard. And, you know, there are options. We can stay in the market. This is obviously something that the board needs to decide. But Andy will tell you that, you know, as far as his concerns are, he is investing in the long-term effect of the bonds and the equities market. It's a long-term investment. He gets that, we get that, and so he's looking from a 10 to 30 year scenario. So a dip in the action today can be recovered over time and gained upon. That's the object of the game as far as that goes, right? But he also said that we have the option to look at our 60-40 split and come up with a little bit more of potentially of a conservative ratio. We can go 90-10, 80-20, or any variable thereof. I believe our policy that I think will be talked about shortly thereafter is what the governing board approved back then was that we, 2015. In 15, there was a recommendation and approval by the governing board to invest in the 60-40 ratio, 40% equity, 60% bonds. And it's stated as such. But the way it is stated, it doesn't give us any leeway as far as being able to adjust those ratios. So we're locked into a 60-40. So data will tell you that, yes, the stock market has taken dips relatively recently in our lifetimes, 9/11 and the Great Recession of 2008. Now, these things didn't recover in the 8-month window that we've looked at with COVID due to the infusion of federal assistance. The rebound from these particular things came over some years of time. So, but they did grow back and improve. But it did take a little bit of time, which would have adjusted our fully funded balance per se. It's volatile, and he also recommends that we potentially invest in less volatile funds, specifically index funds and those types of things. So Vanguard's still on the table. It's just, do we want to look at our percentages and how safe do we want to play? So when it comes to asset management, the board's primary goal, again, is the preservation of the association's resources and reserves. Repair and replacement shouldn't be coordinated, or conditional, I should say, upon a volatile reserve fund, right? The following is a standard hierarchy as to principle. If you're in the stock market and you're doing non-governmental bonds, you're considered high risk. Treasury money funds, medium risk, and bank savings accounts, that may be an inappropriate word. I mean, we're not certainly recommending we put money in a savings account because there's no interest there at all. But CDs and other investment type things that are a little more safe and secure could be a way to go. So most boards interpret their fiduciary responsibilities to mean they got to limit their investments to those that allow their reserves to grow, but don't jeopardize the principal, right? Accounts, CDs, commercial paper, fixed rates, plus principal balance. One more, Katie, if you could, please, thank you. So the discussion points today, if the board would like to take this up, do we want to look at altering our ratios as far to minimize our risk? We can certainly, when it comes to budget time, look at adjusting our APF fees to the tune of $100 would gain us, $125,000 to $150,000 based on the average home sales that we do every year. Reinvest in some savings and CDs and money markets, get out of the equities world. Follow the majority industry with the fiduciary responsibilities of preserving principal. Looking at the board history, I think back in the early 90s, I think they were doing some investment work as well, and that did not turn out very well. So again, the goal of preserving principal and avoiding special assessments when it comes to having to deal with our improvements down the road. I briefly mentioned earlier when we talked about a potential adjustment or correction in the market, a 20% reduction in equities would be $2 million, and that would put us very, very close to the floor when it would come to our fully funded balance. And again, if that happens per se in February or March when we're trying to assemble a budget, that would have an effect on what projects and how many projects move forward. So independently, talking to a CPA, companies are investing in growth. Should the HOA or a community association invest as well? The answer, basically, short answer was no. And their rationale is you shouldn't take risks with your community's funds. Again, a cooperator out of New York, and they manage many, many condos and whatnot, same kind of scenario, kind of planned communities and those types of things. 99% of their organizations are invested only in CDs and money markets, none in equities. Why? Because these are other people's money. And those are what the professionals in the field are telling you. So essentially, the board really needs to make an assessment based on risk and reward when it comes to investments and how that plays out and how it deals with our replacement and repairs of the facilities that we know we need to take care of. I conclude.
Thank you, Bill. Directors, if we have discussion about any of this that's on there, I'll recognize everybody going around. If you have a rebuttal, something another director says, I'll come back to you after everybody has the chance to gone to speak, and I'm going to start with Bob Canero. Yep.
Well, I guess the real question in my mind is not being a financial person, I got enough problems with my own home stuff, but what is the recommendation from our people that we should be doing, that we're not doing?
Okay. Let me just tee this up real quick. Vanguard executes what the governing board tells them to do. Okay, we tell them we want to have our percentage in A and B, and that's what they execute. They choose the funds based on a conservative and a beta ratio that goes on with that, which is exposure to market, but they have to be told what to do, okay?
Okay, but what I'm saying is our people, Pete, his group, them, where they think we should be going. Should we be changing, or are we okay where we are?
Well, that's the next discussion on the motion, Bob. Okay. We'll talk about that going down, because that's the motion, the FI 12, that the I forgot the committee, the B&F committee will recommend to us. But I just want to get any comments about the presentation.
Okay, the presentation was good.
Donna?
I thought it was a great job on the presentation, and personally, and as the director of the board, I think being conservative, I would like to see us do what is recommended based on this report, and that is preservation of our capital. Thank you.
Jim? If you'd like me to come back to you, I can.
Yeah, you might as well.
Not a problem.
I could be long.
Director Connor?
We want to be out of here for lunch.
I'm sorry, Jim, are you still speaking? I don't want to cut you off.
I have a few things to say.
All right, I did have a couple of comments. I understand volatility, and that really scares the bejesus out of most non-professionals. And what happened this year was particularly scary, even for professionals. So I certainly understand why everybody's got sweaty palms, and they're concerned that they take good care of the association's money. The goals that the board set up are threefold. Now, it is true preservation of capital is first, but liquidity, so we could do projects when we needed to, was there. And Vanguard has always been clear. Tell us what's coming. We'll see that the money is liquid for you. They just changed their investments. But the third one was also important to the board way back when, because we found we were losing capital. We were actually not preserving capital because the investments were so conservative in CDs, we were losing ground against inflation. So every day, everything stayed in the CDs, we lost capital. We weren't preserving it. And that's why they had the three goals. And while preservation of capital is first, return on investment, at least to cover inflation, was important back then. Whether we're trying to do more than that in terms of return on investment goes to risk level. But it was a critical issue that we were losing value for the association by sticking all of the funds in CDs. The role of the board, it seems to me, is not to direct investments. It is to set the risk level that those investments should have. So if we think that the risk level that we currently have given direction to Vanguard is too high, is not appropriate, we can ratchet it down. I spoke with Liz Canuck, who was on that investment subcommittee way back when that developed all of this. And she said that the 60-40 rule was, if you will, a short-form version of the risk level that they had developed and given to Vanguard. So it reflects a risk level in time. And as we discussed, Liz and I, she said, and we assumed back then, but did not write into the policy, that the risk level, that the board and the BNF committee, of course, would review the risk level every year because the external environment changes every year. The economy changes, the prospects change. So you sit down and you review the risk level that you want. And what we're doing today and now of saying, is our risk level appropriate that we gave to Vanguard? Or should we change it in light of economic circumstances like the pandemic, the drop, all of that, and the prospects of the future economy? Now, Vanguard can be very helpful in giving us information about that. That's what they do. They got whole departments doing that. And we should listen to what advice they, where they think the economy is going to go. But at the end of the day, we are responsible for setting the risk level, and Vanguard is responsible for somehow making that happen. I personally am not comfortable saying, Vanguard, you must do this with equities or that with equities. Boards that have attempted, these boards that have attempted to direct investments have gotten their fingers burned and a very unhappy constituency. What I'm more comfortable with, which is, I think, our responsibility, is to set the risk level. And if we think it's too high today, and I think Liz thought it was around moderate based on what she had done way back when, and we want it conservative, good, we can do that. And we can say to Vanguard, pick investments that reflect a conservative investment strategy. And if that involves us falling below the likelihood of keeping up with inflation, you got to tell us, because that also does not preserve capital. One last thing, there was a reference, Bill, in your presentation about delaying the irrigation system. It was my understanding that we delayed it in part because we didn't know what the requirements were going to be from the Department of Water Resources, and we didn't want to undertake changes to irrigation systems that may be too much and more expensive than we needed to take, and turf removal and all that. And I find that particularly troubling in light of the rather large expenditure for the Meadow Club that far exceeded the need of safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Haddock?
My question was actually the same as Jerry's was regarding the risk analysis. I assumed that the BNF committee would take a risk analysis yearly, after reading through the bylaws and the policies. But I'd like our policy to be something that Pete and Bill can use, rather than saying you're stuck in this and you can't do anything. The policy should be wide enough for them to be able to say, here's what's happening, here's what, when we've had this discussion with Vanguard, here's what's happening, and can we set the policy so that they could use it?
Yeah, I think that the direction of that policy is on our next item on the agenda.
Okay,
Okay.
that's my feeling on it. I
Okay.
liked the presentation very much, it was very helpful. I'm with Donna in regards to the preservation. I think that it needs to be changed, obviously, we should look at it. It should be looked at every year. I wasn't
Absolutely.
aware it wasn't.
Thank you, Sharon. Director Davidson?
I'm just curious on Sun City and Sun City Grand that don't have those investments. How healthy are their reserves?
I'm not, well, I know a little bit about Sun City. I know a lot more about Sun City Grand. So the 5-second version on Grand is that they have a separate general ledger for their R&R. And just to highlight, we have it all commingled into one. But they isolate their general ledger to say they have a $25 million fully funded balance requirement. They use portions of their annual dues, significant portions of their annual dues, to the tune of $400 for each household of their 1,600 dues goes specifically to R&R. I'm told that they were in about the mid-60s, and their policies indicate a 70% guideline. So they adjust the $400 every year to isolate how much they need to get to that 70% over a 10-year period. Sun City itself, I'm told, does not even establish a reserve study. They do what's called threshold reserve funding. And essentially, I don't have the amount, but let's just say it's double ours, so $50–70 million, and then they go for funding requirements as part of their budget process, and then they evaluate whether or not that staying in a balance they accept as acceptable.
Fisher?
Thank you, excuse me, thank you again, Bill, for that presentation. And I just want to interject a few things because Budget and Finance had a lengthy discussion after the committee saw this presentation on Tuesday. And one of the things that Jerry brought up is there was supposed to be an annual evaluation of risk and reward and assessing this. I cannot find going back 5 years that this has happened. So that is something that right now the committee is doing. We have a subcommittee looking at this, trying to decide where we need to land. We will be talking to Vanguard. I don't know if we will want to look at other investment opportunities other than Vanguard. I don't know where the committee or the subcommittee may go with that. But they are going to come back at our meeting on November 3rd with hopefully some ideas of what direction we may want to go. It is ultimately up to the board to make that decision on how we invest. And we, as the board, the buck stops here with us. And as I've told Bill and Pete many times, they don't need to lose sleep when the investments are going downhill because they are doing what the board has directed them to do. And it's all on our shoulders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Sue?
I guess I'm still at the point where I'm listening to what we have to decide and what we haven't done, and I definitely think that this should be something that comes from the BNF committee on a yearly basis. I think that that idea that was there years ago kind of got lost, and I think it should be put in terms of the duties of that committee to study that issue on a yearly basis and recommend the risk level that they think is appropriate for the times. In terms of what we do now, because we're a little short on time and getting things accomplished, I think we need to make a decision, and I think that I'm feeling that we should get into a little bit of a safer category. I don't know exactly what that number is, but I think things are a little risky now, and we might be wise to lower our risk level.
Thank you. Jim, I'm back to you for the final word.
First of all, let me say I am not opposed to the staff working on this project. I know some people think I am not. I served as the Budget and Finance Director when this process was unfolded. We worked on it for for several years, 3 to 4 years. We studied over, we studied over 6 people, not just Vanguard, but we brought in 6 different directors. I can't name them, but they're in the records. We interviewed them physically, some of them from Illinois, whatever, and to take over our investments. Remember, at the time, the investments were ranging, and we were making 8 and 9%. Investments were pretty high. So we wanted a conservative, very conservative investment group, and we talked to several people, and we came up as a group of people studying it with a 4 to 6 range. At that time, it was very, very correct. And as it shows over a period, you made roughly, and our goal was to make 4%. We were only making less than 1% at the time. So there wasn't, when you consider 9% as the average, and the committee was shooting for 4, we weren't shooting for moon in the sky. The other thing that has not been mentioned, and we studied this also, and that in fiduciality really means more than just not investing. It's like Gary said, if you don't keep up your investments at least to your inflation, you're not doing much fiduciary responsibility. So fiduciary is part of this that hasn't been talked about. Now, I think it would be a disaster for, and another thing, I think that Gary brought up a very good point. I think that our job, and we did miss this, and I'll admit it, it isn't in there where we should study this every month or every year. But what the committee did while I was on it, and I don't know about, well, Ann hasn't had a chance yet, but every time we had the quarterly reports, we would discuss with Vanguard, are we still in the ballpark? And when they talk to you in ranges of 10 years. They will tell you that you're going to lose money 1 year out of that 10. You're just going to lose it, so be prepared. And the board doesn't hear that, so I can understand when you do lose money, it's scary. If you invest money, which most of us don't, and I'm included, I have a broker and I let him do it. I tell him, and when he calls me, I fire him because I don't know anything about it. I hire him. I understand that I'm not going to change your opinion. I think that you've decided that you want a lower risk. I hope that you understand that you've made roughly $4 million, give or take a few, most of it because of stocks and bonds, and you need to stay in that, in my opinion, to some relativity, and it can be changed. I have no version, but I'll say this also. If you're convinced that you want to change the ratio, I'd do it right now, because I'll tell you what, in my opinion, something's going to happen in the election, and I don't think it's going to be good. So if you're going to do it, and I'm not going to vote for it.
I'm going to interrupt you on this one. That's the second part of this discussion in the motion about changing. So
Well,
please
I'm
keep
gonna
your
put it in
comments
the
to
first
what
part.
this is.
I'm going to put it in the first part because I think that's important. And if you're going to change it, and I don't think you should. Anyway, I do, the one question I do have, we've asked this association reserve people, have they told you how many people have $25 million in their account?
No, they've equated 25,000 clients. And to reiterate back to January, he came out and presented the way fully funded balances work to give the owner members an opportunity. We had about 300 people in the audience. his comments, as Bill alluded to afterwards, was, I'm giving you the reserve study component. The reserve funds, when he finished his presentation, we went on in BNF to talked about the financial performance for the month, and he heard, really, you guys have an unrealized gain? What's that on? It's on your equities. You have equities? As Bill alluded to, startled. So initially he went and said, even though he's based in Arizona, he went to his reserve funding specialist, part of Association Reserves. Do you have any restrictions in Arizona, any state statutes? The answer is no. Is that something that across the spectrum of the 25,000, and that's not one office, but he said, quote, I think it's a handful of associations that have executed into the equities environment. It's very, very rare.
It would be interesting to find out if the people that have $25 million are doing it in CDs at less than 1%. I don't think they are.
Sun City Sun City Grand has no equities on their 10 million or so, 17 million, I believe it's 17 million. Sun City accepts that, Jerry, they understand the loss to interest, but that exposure is maybe a 1.5. Currently, right now CDs are earning 0.5. The inflation rate's been about 2. So there is an understanding, but they also recognize that any of the volatility of equities would have even more serious, in their opinion. So Sun City Grand and Sun City do not go into that environment. They understand the inflation, but they do not do that. So your choice.
Thank you, Pete. Jim, you done? Because Bill's got some comments for you.
Just one that I'd like to just, make sure the board is aware as we move forward. There's a lot of reference in our bylaws and our policies when it comes to investing in our financial policies. It makes reference to financial advisors. We don't have one at this particular point in time. We have paid financial consultants, i.e. Mr. Fleming, with Association Reserves. He is the one that works with our staff to make sure that our ongoing plan is up to date, and the fact that our pricing in this plan is legitimate and accurate, right? How much is it going to cost in 10 years to fix a golf course? So all of those calculations is what DJ helps us assimilate, right? The 30-year plan to make sure how we're calculating our fully funded balance, that these numbers from year 1 to year 30 are legitimate and accurate, focusing on the 5 to 10 year frame, right? That's his role. When it comes to Andrew at Vanguard, he's not advising us of anything. He is simply contracted by us to manage our 60-40 percentages in bonds and equities that we told him to do. If he sees a wave coming on the ocean, he's not calling us to give us a heads up. That's not his job. So when it comes to the missing link here is the fact that the association does not have a contracted financial advisor working with us. And so that, to me, is the missing link. So when you're looking at it for advisement as to what should we do, what's coming up ahead, can you advise us of what our numbers should be? Should we be in? Should we be out? Should our 60-40 go to 90-10, 80-20? We don't have that aid. We're relying on, I'm not sure what.
Thank you, Bill. Is there any further discussion on this? Jerry?
A little bit. Again, the percent of equities, bonds, and CDs is something that comes from Vanguard after we give them a risk level so that they can implement it. And if we want a very ultra-conservative, you probably won't put in.
Jerry, I'm going to interrupt you because that's part of the next motion of what the percentage change.
It's already been built in months ago, but that's a different issue. If you're really scared about that, and we would ask your committee to come up quickly, and we'll have a special meeting next week before the election. We can do all those things, but I think we do better to ask our committee, our designated committee, which is already looking at this issue, to go forward quickly and come back to this board with advice.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this?
Mr. President,
Yes, Donna.
I would just like to share that it confuses me that what has been presented is the advice of people that we pay to tell us, specifically the attorney, specifically, you know, what is happening everywhere else? And we're not listening to that. I don't understand. In my opinion, it has, we don't have the responsibility to determine the risk to make our reserve fund grow. It says preservation of capital. That's our responsibility. And it's already been shared that there are other means to be able to get funds without risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion about this? Bob? Nope, okay. Hearing none. Bill, thank you for that presentation. Pete, thank you for your input. Directors, thank you for your input on all that. And 7.09 motion FI12 is all about you.
Thank you, President George. First of all, I do want to thank all the governing board members for your comments this morning. And Budget and Finance Committee is taking this very seriously. We are trying to do things judiciously, but we're not trying to just rush things through and make quick decisions. We want to make informed decisions. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a subcommittee who is looking at this FI12 to look at risk and reward, and hopefully they will come back to us with something on the 3rd of November. But pursuant to that, we did discuss at our meeting 2 days ago that we needed to get out of having an absolute in this policy FI12. And as a result of that, we made a change in 3.1.2.3 to make some changes. So, per the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, I move that the governing board approve the revised wording, which is, funds shall be invested in a range of fixed income and equities, with equities not to exceed 40% of total investments, end of quotes. To financial policy FI12, the investment of association funds at section 3, subsection 3.1.2.3, as redlined.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second. Open discussion. And I think you've already stated what went on with this. I don't have to go to you a second time, do I? No. Roberta? No. Sharon?
I have a question.
Microphone, please.
Sorry. If today, just as an example, there were a 10% drop in our fund, would Pete be able, or Bill or anybody else be able to say we need to do something? How do we fix that?
That is what we're here.
How do we fix that? What's the wording have to say so that they could make an adjustment?
The wording here is allowing them the flexibility of not to be locked into the 60-40 as directed, as it says right now. What Vanguard can basically do, and Pete, you can yell at me and correct me on this one if I'm wrong, is that if in fact, let's just say something went down, it went 10%, when we fall out of that 60-40, they adjust to make that 60-40 stay in that split. Okay, and that's all they're doing. They're staying within there. What I think the policy that the BNF wanted to do with this was to give the flexibility to be, as you would say, do we need to be, and the numbers are meaningless, whether it's 85, 35, it doesn't matter.
Whatever.
Okay, but what we're trying to do is give the ability for not only Pete and them to direct Vanguard to have more flexibility than just to lock the handcuff to the 60-40, and I think that's what this policy is.
Okay, so
Did I
the way-
state that correctly, Madam Treasurer? I get lucky.
So the policy that she just read, or the change that Ann's trying to make on this would be, or the BNF committee makes, is basically to give them that ability?
The flexibility, yes.
Okay, and then is this, and to that end, in my opinion, I would like to see us then still have the committee look at this going forward, so
Okay,
that.
Sharon, we have a motion on the
Oh,
table with
okay.
a second, and we keep the discussion on that point only.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Director Connor, I see, I'm going down the table, I think.
Thank you, George. I support the motion.
Thank you very much. No, I'm sorry, directors first. Jim? I support the motion. Donna? Nod your head, yes or no? No. You don't support the motion?
No, I don't like 40% in equities.
No, we can't exceed that amount. In other words, no matter what happens, we can't exceed that amount. We'll put a ceiling on it. Okay, Sue? Okay. Bill, I'm sorry, I have to go to my directors first.
That's okay, that's all fine. Just a point of clarification. If the economy changes, it is not my decision and it is not Pete's decision as to who, what, and when alters those percentages. We just, governing board adjusts the policy, we implement. And by implementing, we would contract with Vanguard or whoever our investment agent is and tell them, this is the percentage we want to invest, and you back away, like we've done for 5 years with the 60-40 ratio. Right. It's their opportunity. They're being paid to manage that, not us.
Okay, and then in that respect then, if that is correct, do we have to have another board meeting in order to do that?
With the flexibility that we're going to get in there, when BNF comes back to us with a risk assessment ratio, we'll be able to tell Vanguard what our risk assessment ratio is, and they will choose funds accordingly based on that.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Does that state it right, Pete?
It is, so,
Don't say any more then.
fair,
I'm sorry, brother.
accurate, no, that's fine.
Okay.
But just a reminder what Bill was saying, though.
Yeah.
I'm all for financial advisement, but Vanguard made two sentinel points that were on that slide, that one of them was on the slide and the other one was not. And in reference to inflation, that should have been there too. But Vanguard is going to have a horizon that's out, and they're going to, if you called them right now and you heard him, and a lot of you were at the BNF on Tuesday, what you heard him say is convincing, calming words that if you're on a 10-year, 20-year horizon, that the risk of principal exposure is nears almost 0%. So it wants to give you a calming horizon, but he equally would tell you that the choppy waters of any period of time in there, or even more calamitous ones such as 2001 and 2008, are to be expected, everybody. And so part two was and that's what two of the BNF committee members and myself are going to initiate this afternoon. It's the rate of return component as part of the needs for our R&R. As simply put as I can make it, right now it's about $550,000 annual dividends and interest on that Vanguard fund. Clamming up, so to speak, into CDs would be about, at 25 million, 0.5% would get you about 150,000. So it's as simple as this next statement. That 550,000 versus 150 loses you 400,000. Stop talking about growth or decline in the principal for a second, because we don't even budget it that way. I presented a few minutes ago that thankfully 806,000 ahead of budget. But remember what I said, we budget zero. When I say we budget zero, we're not expecting any return. And so that 400,000 over the period of time that this board is, if they haven't asked, I've been presenting what-if scenarios that says, can the association lose that 400,000 gap and not expose your R&R funding? The answer that we're going to put forward to the subcommittee, but I've explained in my presentation on VNF, was no, that 400,000 does not jeopardize a 10-year curve. It doesn't put us down at 40%. You're still in the upper, and so from my chair, you have to decide that that risk of principal, chasing that rate of return is something you want to have exposed, so.
Thank you, Pete. Once again, any more discussion on this issue? I have a motion and a second. I've had discussion. Jim, you got anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, well, wait, what's the motion?
The motion is going to be to change the wording, is the fund shall be invested in a range of fixed incomes and equities, with equities not to exceed 40% of the total investments.
Okay, then my question is relevant.
Okay, good, I'm good with that.
I know. My question is, has there been any thought given to not using percentages, but using a number? In other words, I'm just guessing, just throwing out some stuff.
Okay, Jim, that's not part of this motion. That
That is part of the motion, because you're talking about a percent, and I'm talking about a dollar amount instead of percent. So it is part of the motion.
Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. I'll beg to differ with you. It's not to exceed a percentage. It's a cap on the top, not on how much has to go into it. It's a cap. You have to,
Okay, I'll wait and make the comment later. I don't care.
No.
ahead.
No, I just want to say, we got a motion and a second on the table.
Okay, let's go ahead. I can bring it up later. Doesn't matter to me.
And I'm fine with that. I appreciate that. There is a motion, there is a second on the table. If there's no other discussion on the motion, I'll call for a vote, and I will do a roll call vote on this one. Okay? Director Connor?
Yes.
Director Haddock? Yes. Director Davison?
Yes.
Treasurer Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Fitzsimons?
Yes.
Secretary Maloney?
Yes.
Director Canero?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
So moved. Thank you. Okay, that is done, that is done. Next thing on the list, CPI golf and maintenance staff updates. Carl, you're on the clock.
Thank you, Mr. President and Directors. It's my honor today to give you an update of approximately the last month's business. I believe you have the CIP report from me personally on things that I've been working on, and my slideshow goes in order of that report. So we've completed the R.H. Johnson Library countertops replacement on 10/5, and the slide shows the new tops. Nice improvement to the room. The old tops were really good tops, but all of the color and finish wore off of the materials. An update on the R.H. Johnson Large Dog Park renovation. We are in iron fencing install, concrete curbing, granite landscape install, and final irrigations install, and the delivery of the and installation of the overseeded sod has begun, and you can see that reflected in the photos. This park is going to be a very nicely improved park of what we had before, with very large greenscape areas for grass as requested, 3 additional shade canopies. On the west end between the lawn bowling and the tennis facility, we also have cart drivability for ADA parking, a handful of ADA spaces on concrete for those golf carts. The rest park in designated granite parking spaces. We still have 2 entrances to the park, one along the eastern edge from the small dog park, and then again the described cart parking on the west side from tennis. So based on Todd and I working alongside with the vendor, Todd primarily coaching me with the greenscape portion of this. This sod will require approximately 3 weeks to set in. So even though the project should be accomplished here and finished within the next 2 weeks, I don't believe that we will be able to open this park until approximately December 1st. So more to come on that.
Can I ask a question on that, George?
Sure, go right ahead.
What are you doing about the fence next to the golf course?
So the fence on the east border, the property line between Hillcrest and R.H. Johnson, I've built identical to the small dog park. So it's a 2-foot masonry wall with a 4-foot iron fence on top of it.
Thank you.
Electrified?
Unelectrified. All right, an update on the R.H. Johnson Metal Shop edition. Maricopa County pre-application meeting was completed on 8/25/2020. County required the metal shop's 2 parcels. One parcel is the parking lot, the other parcel was the building, to be combined. The new deed was created and recorded on 10/9. Along with that pre-application meeting, county required us to provide a plan of development application. Simply said here is that area of our community has different requirements because it's residential mixed with business. A different kind of business of us having the rec centers here. I mean, those are real businesses, restaurants, shops, car washes. So a plan of development determines that all things can move forward after the submittal is turned in. The time frame of this plan of development from administrative and substantive review is 1 to 5 months. So between now and 5 months, somewhere in between, I will be able to go on to the next step, which is true architectural engineering and planning. We've done a few of the steps in advance. That shouldn't take that long once we have this substantive review completed. And then we'll be able to go on to the next process of creating the plans and getting pricing for the actual project. The next area is Kuntz. I'm happy to say that the parking lot and walking track will be complete on after 10/24 and 10/25, which is this weekend. So we'll have that all striped. The north parking lot, which I held off from a few weeks ago due to the heavy construction traffic, will also be completed this weekend, along with a resealing of the walking track. The storage lot and storage room in this photo is completed. Craft rooms. This is some photos of your Weavers and your new Weavers edition. So top left is the original Weavers A, all cleaned up and finished. And then the lower portion is the addition space with a teaching room. And the rest of the room is where all their looms and cabinetry and all the work is done for the crafts. The next slide is for the Palo Verde Patchers. This is the group that we primarily provided this edition for. And in the bottom left photo, you can see all the doors that divide the original Weaver's room from this new Quilter's room. And these are their new spaces. All those tables represent where all their sewing machines will be placed, and underneath those tables are nice electric outlets specifically set up for per the club's planning, and the rooms look spectacular. Next in the slides is the courtyard renovation, also complete. There's approximately 3 slides here. This one shows us from inside the courtyard looking towards the other courtyard. This one shows the inside courtyard looking out to the south parking lot. You can see the iron enclosure in the back. All those open up like French windows. It's quite beautiful, all the plants. Low watering, so a lot of cacti in the decorative pots. Not a big impact to Todd. And then this is the final space, and you can see some decorative tile. All these paver and tile areas in the next 2 weeks will have beautiful furniture for that living room feeling and multi-purpose use. So.
Oh, question again.
Go ahead, Jim.
Are you able to put furniture in there? You haven't got it anyplace else.
I don't understand your question.
Well,
Social gathering.
because of COVID, we aren't putting.
Jim, please
furniture
talk
up
into
to
your
be-
microphone.
Oh, I understand. So if the rec center staff determines that this area is closed due to COVID, the furniture still will be placed there, it just won't be utilized like club rooms.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next is the completion of the Kuntz pool deck. This is a drone shot, and I don't know if anybody remembers the old oranges and yellows in the concrete surface. Well, this is the new rubber flooring surface. It has nice tones of different color rubber applications, so you see some light areas, some dark areas. Next slide will show you the finished product. We have the blue zone is your 4-foot barrier, kind of helps us understand where, bottles and items that aren't supposed to be placed alongside the pools. It clarifies the distance spacage. And then a beautiful, like I said, multi-tone color for everyone to walk around and use the furniture. Next slide. If you go back one more, Katie, and you can see, again, how these materials go up against edges or separated. It feels great to walk on. Roberto will tell you how nice it is to
That was
stroll
quite,
and.
that was
It
abusive.
works.
It works, there you go.
That was abusive, Carl.
Okay. Just a reminder of, amongst all these projects, the Coons Spa Room finished quite a few weeks ago, and that's what it looks like. You had the facts and findings from last year, and here are the finished new locker rooms for men's and women. We move over to Grandview. I've completed in the last few weeks the seal and stripe on this parking lot. And then finally, we had the very large and first of many mill and replacement projects. Pebblebrook is the first one. You can kind of see in these pictures the beginning process, which is the milling, taking away the old asphalt. Next slide. Preparation for new asphalt and the obstacles that we come across. So all of our golf courses are heavily impacted with watering over many years, and that water gets underneath that asphalt, and the asphalt doesn't necessarily get affected because it's compacted and sitting there. But once you remove it, you see that the soils are very unstable. So in these photos, we've had to do some old pipeline repairs and valve adjustments. And then the concrete was added to the soils to stabilize those soils. And then the final process is the grading, all the way through final grading and into the completed process. Last slide. That is my report, and I've hoped you've enjoyed these projects to date.
We hope you enjoyed them, Carl.
I did, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the directors? Yes, Jim?
Any date opening for the pools?
That wouldn't be my decision to make.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the directors?
Well, when's the whole project supposed to be done?
The project is considered complete. I have punch list items going on actively.
Okay.
One statement to that, actually. The project does require certificate of occupancy. So Maricopa County is reviewing the as-bills. They were turned in. And when we get those back in a week or so, then we should have our final inspection for certificate of occupancy.
If you said it, I missed it. How many parking spaces did you add here?
If you talking the Coons parking lot,
Yeah,
I believe we're going to end up between 53 and 60 spaces.
thank you.
Any other comments for Carl or questions?
Just a comment, President.
Yes.
I live 3 blocks. Would you have it open soon?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carl. I would assume Todd is next. Up there. I saw him over there. There he is. Todd, thank you for such great work. And Pat, I got to tell you, some of these aerial shots are just spectacular of our golf courses. They're absolutely great.
Good morning, Mr. President, Governing Board Directors. I have just a short update today on overseeding and our projects that we completed over the summer on our golf courses and staffing. I also added a little section on landscape maintenance, just to give you an update on where we're at with that and what's open and what's closed. So first, our overseeding. Grandview, Echo Mesa, Pebblebrook, and Desert Trails. Those 4 golf courses opened this past Tuesday, the 20th, and we were able to open with no cart path restrictions. So I think everybody was very happy about that. Today, we closed Deer Valley, Stardust, and Trail Ridge, and we're looking at reopening on November 17th, which is a Tuesday for Ladies' Day, and I don't anticipate any cart path restrictions at that time either. So we're about halfway done. This is just a picture of a couple days before opening. This was over on number 1 Fairway at Grandview. We got a really good catch on the overseeding this year. It was a little bit warm, which we had to do a little bit of reseeding. A lot of water had to go out at this time just to keep that ryegrass alive, but we did get a good catch. And, you know, I always say a good sign of a lot of ryegrass is if you can stripe it up like that. That means you got a lot of ryegrass out there. Bermuda grass, your summer grass, doesn't quite stripe like that. So that's a good sign when you see that. And again, over at Pebblebrook, number 4, same thing. Really a good solid catch on the ryegrass over there as well. And then our Range T project. This was a couple days before opening. I tell you, I was over there Tuesday morning and got to witness the first shot, or the first divot that came out of that tee box. So it's kind of hard to watch that, but that's all part of the deal. A lot of good comments. I was over there earlier this morning and yesterday with the men's club, and they did notice the new tee and the increased size, so they were real happy about that. And then Desert Trails, our bunker project, turned out great. We finished that about 2 weeks before overseeding. The sand was a little bit soft still, but it's starting to firm up. So everyone seems to be pleased with the changes that we made over there. And, drone picture, this is our big project over at Pebblebrook on number 18 and number 10 shoreline project. Turned out great. A lot of good comments so far this week on that. A lot of people drive by on 128th and they tend to slow down and look at that lake and that new wall, so it turned out good. All right, just our staffing, this spreadsheet that we put together a while back, and it's by golf course, and you can see that we have the full-time open positions. As you can see, Grandview, 5 positions down. We update this every Monday, so this was updated last Monday, the 19th. And then COVID-related, we have 1 person out, light duty, anybody that called out sick. We had 3 employees that called out sick on Monday. Nobody took a vacation or personal day, so you can see that 25 employees down if you add all that together. So 20 full-time positions. That's a few more than what we had last week, which we had 18, so it's going up a little bit. The good thing about it is we're getting through overseeding. And then things slow down once we get all the golf courses open. We're not having to mow rough. We're not having to trim trees and bushes as much. Irrigation repairs start to slow down. But we'd really like to get those numbers up, or down, I should say, on the full-time positions, especially going into May and in the summer months, because that's when our workload really picks up. So we're going to work on that as soon as we get all the golf courses open. Hopefully we can hire some more people, and then come May, we'll be ready to go. And then landscape maintenance, overseeding update. The Liberty Field reopened this past Monday, the 19th. It seemed like everybody was happy to get back out there. It's been a while for them. And then the small dog park, Section 1, reopened also on Monday. It seemed like all the dogs were real happy to get back out on that fresh grass.
They ruin it quick.
And then Beardsley Park has been seeded already, and that's scheduled to open in late November. R.H. Johnson Small Dog Park, that's Section 2, has been seeded, and we're looking at opening that on Monday, November 16th. And the Great Lawn down over here at the pool has been seeded. We've motored a couple times, and we're looking at reopening that on November 9th. And so that concludes my update on our overseeding.
Thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd about the fabulous grass that's out there?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just want to say, I know the golf committee, we took a tour of both Pebblebrook and Desert Trails, and I want to thank Todd and his crew. We were absolutely amazed. We're not just looking, saying at those few that you can say, as he said, in 128th, we actually went down all the fairways. I suggested to him, and Pat probably too, he can help, we should get the LPGA out here to play, because I don't think there's any other better golf courses.
They take too big of divots. No, absolutely. I mean, you see people, and like Todd said, when you see them going by our golf courses, they slow down and they look at how finely manicured It is, and it once again leads into the thing is that we are a adult, active, premier golf community, and if you like the golf, boy, you couldn't come to a better mecca than Sun City West. Sorry about that. Directors, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to have a comment. I apologize for that. Bob, anything else? No, that's all. Any other comments or questions for Todd? Hearing none. Next thing on the list, goal assessment. I'm sorry, I got to click on there, and then I got a couple of questions from there. Master plan, 15%, we're approximately, where we sit with that is, we originally started out with a one-all, and we started dividing it up, and right now, the master plan is moving forward, but it's in different individuals' hands for what their expertise is. Revised budget process timeline is with Pete right now. They're going to be going over in detail with BNF, and which is going on there. And as we go through the budget process this year, we're going to be looking at how we can streamline it going forward. That's it. Establish a policy for charter club improvements by prioritizing safety, differentiating needs between needs and want and accounting for improvements versus replacements. Donna's committee and Donna's group is working diligently. They have working with Russ and with Carl, with Riley and their own committee. They're coming probably, I think, in December with a finished product on this. Awesome.
Hopefully.
So that's where it is. Clarify policies of dues and liens. We've took care of that last month. We're there. Identifies opportunities to increase governing board visibility. As Bill says, our pamphlet that's out there about our dues is something that's been not only well received but well out there. Obtain the irrigation requirement confirmation from ADS. I never thought I'd have to say this. We have retained, and with Hazelwood, a water attorney. I never thought we'd have to have a water attorney, but that's my own opinion on that one. Virtual meetings and events during COVID time. The technologies, I know we're on the budget and it's being put into the social hall, to the Palm Ridge, and to the lecture hall, some upgrades, so these will be up and running. And that's our goal assessment from there. And now I will be happy to go to board member comments. Yes, Sharon?
Can you go back over the strategic plan again just for a second?
Sure.
Are there meetings being held or any?
What we did with the master plan
Right.
is we have it, we wanted to have it, and what we did is we found out that our former architect was not a one-all.
Right.
So what we did is we split it up there and gave out different portions of our community, how much, open space we have, those are the things, and it was farmed out to different groups, and we're waiting for them to come back to us. We hope to have a good idea in January.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I'll start with you then, Sharon. Any comments?
I wanted to know what the outlook is for getting Kuntz open.
For getting what?
Kuntz opened. Do we have all the employees we need, and is it going to be opening soon?
As of last Monday, we were speaking with David and the recreation staff based on the document that we shared with you earlier relative to COVID and the numbers that we are at with the substantial transmission of this thing. We are mandated by the state to do various types of things when it comes to taking care of the cleaning of our rec centers. And as of right now, we're down 12 people. We've taken the people from Kuntz, and we have them working at R.H. Johnson and I think Palm Ridge, as well as Beardsley. But in order to keep those facilities open and to address everything that we've attested that we are going to do, it requires people. And so Dave and his staff, as well as Russ, they are assessing basically who can we pull, who can we share, and putting that program together. So in the process of waiting for our certificate of occupancy for Kuntz, we are trying to come up with, A, more employees, and two, how can we open these facilities at various levels of operation. We may not be able to go from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. We may have to adjust our timing just to be able to accommodate the number of people we need to keep this COVID thing at bay.
Okay, thank you. And then the other part of that is going forward with budget. Are these employees that we have to keep on the payroll on a permanent basis? Because if COVID is still around and we're still doing the same kinds of things through spring, is this been budgeted for already, or is it looking going forward?
These are part-time employees, which basically are budgeted, and where we've picked up by closing and some of those things, we do have some saved revenue or saved expenditure funds that we've been able to utilize. So I think we're sitting okay as far as funds go. But again, it really is a matter of when we can open at full speed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Director Connor?
Bill, I know you and your team took a hit from members that were very frustrated when we had to close down facilities during the height of the crisis, pandemic. Now that we're open partially, has the responses or comments you're getting from the members improved a little?
I would say yes. I think we get a lot of thanks from the community members, basically asking us and thanking us for staying the ground and keeping our back strong, as far as they know we're getting a little bit of abuse when it comes to people demanding, open this and open that. But there are a lot of people here that are still very, very concerned about COVID, and they are very thankful for the opportunities and the procedures that we've implemented. So that's a good thing. And I think by and large, the biggest thrust of complaints that we were getting were, I think, from the ideology that since we closed a rec center, that's what their dues specifically went to pay for. And with the creation of the 3-page or the trifold piece of information that explains what your dues actually go for, has really quieted things down.
That's great. Thank you.
Roberta?
Well, the Properties Committee last week did our Kuntz tour, and we were very impressed with what's been done and look forward to it reopening.
Thank you. And
No additional comments, thank you.
Sue?
No comments.
Oh, Donna?
No comment.
Bob? Jim?
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome. I didn't want you to get out of here before 11.
Well, we knew it was going to.
Mainly, this is for the subcommittee, but I also wanted the board to hear it. But while the BNF subcommittee is meeting, there may be other ways other than using percentages as a guide for how much money is put into stocks and bonds to speak of. You might want to use the amount of money. Just give me an example of how it might work. Let's say that the money over the last 5 years raised $4 million. Just use a figure. Put that in there, and then say, okay, we'll use 10% of the funds. That's just 250. So you got $6 million. You put in the stocks and bonds, and the rest of it. That's it. They can't go any higher than that, so you can't lose anything. That's just an example.
And Jim,
all I'm saying. Thank you very much.
And Jim,
Comment.
that's a very, very good idea. To look at those kinds of things. I mean, that's what it is. Staff, any other comments from staff? Carl?
George, I'd just like to shout a thanks to not only Todd for coming along with all his busyness, that, repairing all those things that get broken during construction. His guys have been just, so helpful. Greg Bond for all his IT work and putting these rooms together. And then facilities maintenance. Byron Jones, the supervisor, has to give me a hand virtually every day when it comes to finishing these rooms by accommodating the clubs and moving shelves, hanging clocks, putting the rooms together, and that can't get done without their help. So thank you to all those.
Okay, now, we have a comment from one of our constituents, and I want to read it so they know, because they're online here. this from one of our owner members. While it's important for the BNF committee to look at this issue to make recommendations, it is concerning that the board would leave us exposed during this election time. There is not time to have another BNF meeting and a board meeting before the election. Why can't the board change us to a safe position and then give time for everything else to be looked at? Our current risk is way greater than our potential reward. And I'm going to forward this to you, and you can answer this person directly if you'd like. I know you're going to say thank you.
I do appreciate the comment, and I would have to say that I agree with this, but we are taking the approach right now that we do not want to do anything quickly. We are hopeful that we can have something at the next BNF committee that we can take to the governing board. We know that the election is looming. However, we don't think that the stock market's going to fall off the cliff at this particular point in time. So we probably are not going to have everyone in agreement with us, but we are addressing this issue, which needs to be addressed, and we're doing it as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Ann. I have, other than thanks to all the committees and the hard work that is going forward, we are moving quickly along to get our policies in line with what's going on. I cannot thank Pete, Bill, Carl, Russ, and Katie, the staff that goes on, the work they do behind the scenes. But every now and then, the governing board has to realize that we have a person who we need to recognize for the phenomenal work this person does on our behalf. And that's Karen, our executive assistant. And I want to make sure that she knows that we know that she keeps us on the straight and narrow and keeps us all in the, as the old scholar would say, every jot and tittle being put correctly in each one of our policies and procedures that go on. And I wanted to thank you all for that. Hearing nothing else, our next meeting is November 6th, workshop in the social hall. Our next regular meeting is the 19th. Hearing nothing else, I will be happy to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.